Hello, and welcome back to Gunfighter Life, the podcast where we talk about gunfighting the right way, from a Judeo-Christian worldview and real-world first-hand experience. Today is a short episode on a single cartridge. I'm very blessed with experience and knowledge, and I try to pass it on, and it seems like these cartridge talks are some of the favorite ones. So, since I mostly do this to give you guys information, I'll give you what you want. Roll into a quick abbreviated bio and then into the main topic. I am your host, Michael Melito. First and foremost, I am a Christian, and I don't apologize for that. God is number one, and I want to recognize that. I'm a combat veteran of the United States Marine Corps. A couple of combat tours in Iraq. I was an urban warfare instructor for the Marine Corps. I also served in the United States Army. I also served with LAPD. I'm a state rifle and pistol champion a few times over, a professional big game hunter and guide, FBI certified firearms instructor. Blessed be the Lord my rock, who trains my hands for war and my fingers for battle. Psalm 144. Alright, without further delay, let's talk about today's cartridge, which is going to be the .45 Long Colt. Now, if you listen to this in order, these cartridge talks, you know we just talked about the .410 shotgun. You may want to listen to that one before or after this one because they kind of tie together in recent years. The tourist judge, like it or hate it, the Smith & Wesson governor and guns like it, the little Derringers, they kind of breathe new life into both of these cartridges in that it lets you fire both. This isn't that new. The Thompson Center Contender, which is a gun that I really love, did this a long time ago where they had barrels that would chamber the .45 Long Colt and the .410 shotgun shell. But when the judge came out, it really did make like its own little category of personal defense weapon. And obviously that fires, like we just talked about, the .410 and the .410 shotgun shell. But you know the .45 Long Colt goes back a lot farther than that. So let's dive in a little bit of the history of the .45 Long Colt. Now some people will call it the .45 Colt, some people the .45 Long Colt. Now I'm what I would call myself a ballistics nerd, a gun nerd, but even I don't get wrapped around the axle on that. Either one, whatever you want to call it is fine. The .45 Colt, .45 Long Colt. Now the resources I'll be using on the history is going to be Wikipedia, as well as my trusty Hornady reloading manual, as well as my own knowledge and my own understanding. Now from Wikipedia it says the .45 Colt came out in 1872. Been in production from 1873 to the present. So quite a long history. Originally chambered in Colt's famous Peacemaker, which itself has a long and prestigious history. In fact, from what I understand, if you don't know, the U.S. military was so happy with the performance of the .45 Long Colt, it for a brief time switched to a smaller caliber, and then in one of the skirmishes, wars in the Philippines, their smaller caliber handguns weren't doing as well, and they wanted a cartridge that would do as well as the .45 Long Colt, which led to the 1911 trials, which led to the .45 ACP, the .45 automatic Colt pistol in the 1911 as we know them today. So quite a pretty cool history there. Just the history on it alone could be its own podcast, but that's not really what we're talking about today, but still pretty cool. Something that's been in production from 1873 to the present must bring something to the table. And what does it bring to the table? It brings a big chunk of lead or copper jacketed lead at moderate velocities. That's what it brings to the table. Quite a bit of knockdown power, quite a bit of stopping power. Been used for defense for quite a while. It's been used for hunting for quite a while. Been used on the frontier of America, been used around the world. So I think we can say that it's got a proven track record. Now, if we're talking about ballistics, and I'm not talking about the original black powder loadings, the original old school, Colt Peacemaker loadings. I'm not a cowboy action shooter. That's not what I'm about. I'm talking about using it today. Per my Hornady reloading manual, for a revolver, pretty much any modern revolver, you've got your 225 grain FTX bullet going at right around 1,000 feet per second. Got a 250 grain bullet going at around 850. And it lists the 255 grain solid lead at 900 feet per second. Now those are pretty respectable, and if you know anything about ballistics, the numbers, you'll know that that's pretty close to the 45 ACP, which again is in the 1911, which again a lot of people tout as being a great effective handgun round. In fact, you heard my bio, I've been the commander of a tactical team, and a lot of times, even though I have double stack, STI 9mm that are great, a lot of times I'll carry a Colt 1911 back to the Marine Corps M45A1 that I'm very blessed to have, and 45 ACP a lot of times will be on my hip, and I trust my life to it still. Now and do your own research for your guns and what you have, but my reloading manual and some other reloading manuals list special loads for other firearms like Ruger, like Thompson Center, that can handle hotter loads. So let's look at some of those. We got a 250 grain bullet, hollow point, XTP at 1,400 feet a second. And that's not even going off the charts. That's a published load. You got 250 grain bullet at 1,400 feet a second. Now that's quite a bit more powerful than the 45 ACP that I'm aware of. And you've got a 300 grain bullet at 1,300 feet a second. That's a screaming hot load. In fact, if you don't know the story of the 44 Rem Mag, which I'll get into real briefly, 44 Remington Magnum is not actually 44 caliber. It's 42 caliber. Look that up and verify it if you want, but that's what it is. Because there's more room in the cylinder back in the day, and the metallurgy wasn't what it is today, you could load the 44 Special hotter and hotter, because it gave you more steel in between the chambers, which means the gun wouldn't blow up when you loaded it hotter than you were supposed to. That's what a lot of the old timers did. And hence we got the 44 Remington Magnum out of that. But you may agree or disagree with this, but look at the load data and see if you can't load in modern handguns like a Ruger or a Thompson Center, if you can't load a 45 Long Colt as hot or hotter than a 44 Remington Magnum. Look at some of the Buffalo bore loadings that are outrageous for 45 Long Colt and see if it's not an outstanding powerhouse of a handgun round. I mentioned briefly that just like they uploaded the 44 Remington Magnum, they also uploaded the 45 Long Colt a little bit longer into the 454 Casull, which is itself a really cool round. But we'll probably have a different episode on that. Just looking at that load again, that's pretty cool. A 300 grain bullet at 1,300 feet a second. That is awesome. So let's talk about a few of the really cool firearms that are chambered in the 45 Long Colt. We talked about the Smith & Wesson Governor. We talked about the Taurus Judge. Both of those are 5 or 6 shot revolvers that let you chamber the 45 Long Colt or 410 shotgun shells, which are pretty flexible and pretty cool. Would I consider them the ultimate in personal defense? No, I would not, because I don't carry one of those for personal defense. So I wouldn't recommend them unless you have a specific reason and that's what you like. You're an American, you can buy the guns that you want. We could argue whether those guns are great or not, but the fact that they exist has breathed new life into both cartridges, which I think is great in and of itself. Other firearms. A very good friend of mine who has recently passed on once gave me a Winchester lever action Trapper and 45 Long Colt. What an amazing gun that was. I traded him a 22 single action revolver. Not exactly a fair trade, but I felt I had to give him something because he gave me such a great gift. What a wonderful gun that cool little Trapper is. And they still make it. They still make Winchester still makes the lever action Trapper. I believe a Trapper. If not, they still make a carbine 45 Long Colt. Again, if you put those hotter loads, check with your manufacturer, check with all that stuff. But that really turns that into a pretty cool brush gun, hunting gun, big game gun at short range. That data that I gave you was for pistols. You'll obviously get more velocity out of a rifle. So who knows what that velocity would be on that 300 grain bullet out of a rifle. But it would be pretty hot. And I know that a lot of American shooters in years have gone crazy for the high ballistic coefficient, long-range, 1,000-yard shooting performance, which there's nothing wrong with that. That's great. I'm glad that new shooters are getting into the sport. I like that. I myself, one of my go-to guide guns is a 6.5 Creedmoor, so I'm not going to knock that. But sometimes a big heavy 300 grain hunk of lead traveling at moderate velocities is a good choice for brush hunting, for in-range close hunting, for a quieter report. You could load that 300 grain bullet down to subsonic out of a rifle and it would be very quiet. And you wouldn't need a suppressor. And that's all I'm going to say about that. It would be totally legal. You wouldn't need a suppressor. You'd have a big 300 grain bullet that you could push to around 950 feet a second and have it be subsonic. Still quite a bit of lethality on deer or that size of a creature. And that's pretty cool. If you want to just hand load, if you want a cartridge you can reload with black powder or modern powder, if you want, a Ruger Red Hawk or Super Red Hawk or Black Hawk or a Thompson Center or something like that, it would be a pretty cool cartridge to have. If you wanted something you reload and cast your own lead bullets for, yourself a Lyman or a Lee mold, some semi-wad cutters, which are great all-around target hunting performance bullets. Able to shoot a powerful handgun cartridge without a lot of money. Be a great choice. So the 45 long Colt, a pretty cool cartridge when it was introduced in 1873, and a pretty cool cartridge today. With that, guys, I'll wrap up this episode of Cartridge Talk. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, like, subscribe, comment, leave a review, share with your friends. If you want to help out the podcast for free, if you want to help out financially, if you thought this podcast was worth $1 or any other ones or any other content was worth $1, please consider supporting because these podcasts are free to listen to and I want to keep it that way, but they're not free to produce. If you want to promote this content and get it out there, please consider supporting. You can go one-stop shop for pretty much everything is goodshepherdtraining.com, goodshepherdtraining.com. Scroll down to the bottom. There's a Patreon link, a bunch of pictures on there. You can see pictures of me hunting and foraging and gathering, living off grid, some old military pictures on there. If you like this podcast, you also may like the Alpha Male podcast and Simple Man Sermons, the preachings of a simple man called by God to share the good news of Jesus Christ. And you can find those and a bunch of other stuff at goodshepherdtraining.com. We all know what the price of a box of ammo is nowadays, so consider a very small fraction of that and supporting on Patreon and continue this content. With that, guys, I'll say thanks and have a blessed day.